I never imagined I'd find myself in the emergency room, staring at my dad lying barely conscious on a gurney, and yet here I was, heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. Have you ever felt that moment when everything you thought you knew about your life starts to unravel in seconds? That was me. My dad, Robert Carter, 58, the man who had taught me how to ride a bike, who had cheered the loudest at every school play, was suddenly fragile, hooked up to machines, his eyes fluttering as if he were teetering between this world and the next. And I, Emily Carter, 28, daughter, and suddenly the only person standing between him and a potential disaster, was frozen with a mix of fear, guilt, and confusion. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. The room was chaos disguised as calm. Nurses moved with urgent precision, voices clipped and fast, monitors beeping incessantly like a countdown clock. Dr. Harris, the ER doctor, stood over my dad with a clipboard, eyes scanning the charts, jaw tight. Then he said words that made my blood run cold. "We need family blood now." My mind went blank. Family blood? Me? I had never been in this position, never imagined rolling up my sleeve while my father's life hung by a thread. But the fear of inaction was greater than any fear of a needle. I volunteered, my arm trembling as the nurse prepared the vial. Then something happened that I'll never forget. Nurse Tanya, 32, glanced at the screen after taking the sample, and she went pale. She leaned closer to Dr. Harris, whispering something so urgent that I felt a chill ripple through my spine. The doctor's face changed in an instant. Calm, confident, in control, gone. He turned from my dad to me, and for a split second, I could have sworn he was trying to read my soul. And then he said it. Words that shattered every assumption I had ever held about my life. "Sir, you can't be her biological father." I froze. My mother's hand started trembling uncontrollably, her knuckles white as she gripped the hospital bed rail. I wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, to deny it. But the words were lodged in my throat. Dr. Harris closed the curtain around my dad, leaving me standing there, heart racing, alone with the weight of a question I wasn't ready to ask. If Robert isn't my father, then who is? And more importantly, why hadn't anyone told me? But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. I watched the needle sink into my vein, and suddenly every thought I'd ever had about my dad and myself felt like it was unraveling. My stomach churned, my pulse raced, and a million what-ifs flashed through my mind. What if my dad wasn't my father? What if my whole life had been built on a lie? I tried to focus on the beeping machines, the sterile smell of the ER, anything to distract me, but nothing worked. Every sound felt amplified, the monitor's incessant beep, the muffled voices of nurses in the hallway, the quiet gasp from my mom behind me. I could feel her panic like a physical weight pressing against my back. Dr. Harris stood over me, clipboard in hand, his face a mask of professional calm, but even he couldn't hide the tension now. Nurse Tanya, who had been cheerful and composed a minute ago, leaned closer to him, whispering something that made my stomach drop. She looked like she had seen a ghost. I wanted to ask, "What is it? What did you see?" But I didn't dare. My own fear was enough to keep me frozen. I had grown up believing that Robert, my dad, was my father in every sense that mattered. The man who coached my Little League team, who stayed up with me through nights of sickness, who cheered me on at graduation, he was my dad. And now, one sentence from a doctor, one pale look from a nurse, had thrown my entire reality into chaos. I glanced at my mother, Linda, 54, and saw her gripping the bed rail so tightly her knuckles were white. Her lips trembled, and she didn't say a word. I suddenly realized she wasn't the only one terrified. I was too, but I was also angry. Angry that something so monumental could be hidden from me. Then came the words I'll never forget. Dr. Harris looked directly at my dad, voice low but steady. "Sir, you can't be her biological father." My knees buckled inside, though I stayed upright. I wanted to ask, how? Why? But I knew it wouldn't make sense yet. My brain tried to find a loophole, some medical mistake, some improbable scenario that could make this wrong. But the expressions on the doctors' and nurses' faces told me everything. The curtain closed abruptly, shutting me out from the gurney, leaving me alone in a small, enclosed space with my racing thoughts. Questions stormed through my mind. If Robert wasn't my dad, then who was? Why hadn't my mom told me? And what did this mean for the life I thought I knew so well? My heart hammered as I tried to make sense of it all. But I knew one thing with terrifying clarity: this was only the beginning. What came next would reveal truths that could either destroy my family or redefine everything I had ever believed. I couldn't move. The curtain between me and my dad felt like a wall I couldn't climb, a wall separating me from the answers I desperately needed. My mind was spinning. How could the man who raised me, loved me, and shaped every memory of my childhood not be my father? I turned to my mom, Linda, hoping for some explanation, some reassurance. But her hands were trembling so badly she could barely hold the hospital bed rail. Her eyes were wide, filled with guilt and fear, and for the first time, I realized how much she had been carrying alone. "Mom," I said, my voice tight with emotion, "what is going on? Why didn't you tell me?" She swallowed hard, tears welling up in her eyes. "Emily, there's something you need to know, something I should have told you years ago." I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. Every memory I had of my childhood suddenly felt like a puzzle with missing pieces. The trips to the park, the school plays, even the way my dad's blood type never matched mine, all of it now seemed strange, like signs I had ignored. Dr. Harris cleared his throat, breaking through the heavy tension. "You need to sit down," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "This isn't just about blood. There's more you need to understand." My stomach dropped. More? How could there possibly be more? He gestured toward the folder in his hands, and I could see the papers inside, charts, numbers, letters of analysis. Nurse Tanya hovered nearby, her face still pale, her eyes darting between the three of us as if bracing for impact. As my mom began to speak, fragments of her confession emerged. I learned about the medical complications my dad had that made a biological connection impossible. I learned about choices she had made in secrecy, decisions she had carried alone to protect us both. And as she spoke, a part of me screamed in anger while another part ached with empathy. Could I ever forgive her? Could I even trust the reality I had been living in? I kept thinking about all those little odd moments over the years, the differences I had shrugged off, the quirks that never quite lined up. And suddenly, everything clicked. But just as I was piecing it together, Dr. Harris held up the folder. "There's one more test," he said quietly. "And it's not just about blood." I froze, my heart hammering again. My entire life, my family, my identity, it was all on the brink of change. I wanted to demand answers, but deep down I knew the truth, when it came, would be bigger than anything I could imagine. And what came next would either shatter us completely or finally explain everything. I braced myself as Dr. Harris opened the folder, the sterile smell of the ER mixing with the metallic scent of fear that clung to me. Every heartbeat felt like it was echoing in my ears. I had imagined a million scenarios, some horrific, some absurd, but nothing could have prepared me for the words that would finally answer the question I had been terrified to ask. If Robert wasn't my father, then who was I really? Dr. Harris looked at me, his eyes serious but not unkind. "Emily," he said, "the results are conclusive. Robert Carter is not your biological father." My mind went blank. The room seemed to tilt, the sounds of the ER fading into a distant hum. I wanted to scream, cry, run, demand answers all at once. Instead, I just stared at him, waiting for the next piece of this puzzle. My mom, Linda, finally spoke, her voice trembling as she admitted the truth. "Emily, I should have told you years ago. You were conceived via IVF. A donor was used and I didn't tell Robert. I wanted him to be your dad in every way that mattered, but I never prepared for the consequences of keeping this secret from you." I felt a storm of emotions, shock, betrayal, confusion, but beneath it all, a strange, unexpected sense of relief. The puzzle pieces I had been trying to force together suddenly fell into place. All those little differences, the mismatched blood type, the strange quirks, it all made sense now. Robert, my dad, looked stricken. His face was pale, but then, slowly, he stepped forward, his eyes softening. "Emily," he said quietly, "I may not be your biological father, but I am your dad. Always have been, always will be." I felt a tear roll down my cheek. Here was the man who had taught me, loved me, protected me, reminding me that family isn't only DNA. It's loyalty, it's love, it's presence. And yet, there was still one more twist. Dr. Harris explained that the donor was a distant relative of a family friend, someone whose traits had subtly appeared in me over the years, explaining the uncanny resemblance in certain features. Suddenly, even that small sense of mystery in my reflection made sense. I looked at my parents, my chest tight, but my heart lighter. Everything had changed, but somehow, nothing about the love in that room had. I realized then that the truth didn't have to destroy us. It could reshape us, redefine us, teach us to see our family not just as biology, but as the people who showed up, who fought for us, who stayed. I looked at my dad and my mom, a deep, quiet gratitude filling me. And in that moment, I knew that whatever came next, the bond we had forged in honesty, fear, and love would never break. But even as I absorbed the revelation, a thought lingered, unspoken, teasing the edges of my mind. What other truths had we been hiding? And what would happen if they ever came to light? I sat there in the quiet aftermath, the chaos of the ER fading into a heavy stillness. The truth had landed like a hammer, shattering assumptions I didn't even know I was holding onto. I had come in expecting to save my dad, to hold his hand through a moment of crisis, but instead, I had discovered a truth that could have rewritten everything about who I thought I was. And yet, as I looked at Robert, my dad, and saw the love in his eyes, I realized that the foundation of family isn't built on biology alone. Mom, still trembling, finally allowed herself to exhale. "I'm sorry, Emily. I should have told you sooner," she whispered. And in that apology, I felt both the weight of years and the possibility of healing. I wanted to scream, to ask why, to demand explanations for the decades of secrecy. But instead, I chose to listen, to absorb the raw honesty finally laid bare. Sometimes the hardest truths take the longest to speak. Sometimes they're more terrifying to share than to face. I thought about my childhood in a way I hadn't before. The laughter, the birthday cakes, the late-night talks with my dad, all of it had been real. Just because the genetics didn't match didn't mean the love wasn't genuine. Robert had been my father in every way that mattered. The man who stayed, the man who fought, the man who loved without condition. And that realization was both grounding and breathtaking. As I reflected, I realized something profound. Life isn't always fair. Families are messy. Secrets exist, and sometimes they're kept with the best intentions. But the moments when the truth comes crashing in, those are the moments that define us. They force us to ask the hardest questions. Who am I? Who do I trust? And perhaps most importantly, what does family really mean? I had my answers now, but I knew this day would linger with me forever. I looked into my dad's eyes one last time before leaving the ER, feeling a depth of gratitude I couldn't fully put into words. "Thank you," I whispered, though it was more than just for today. It was for every moment we had shared, every laugh, every lesson, every sacrifice. And as I walked away, I felt a new understanding settle over me. Family isn't just about blood. It's about presence, love, and the people who choose to stand by you even when the world threatens to fall apart. So if you're hiding a secret or living with unspoken truths, remember this. Confronting them is terrifying, but it's also the only way to truly see who you are and who will truly stand with you. Because in the end, the truth doesn't always hurt, it just changes the way you see everything.